Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, December 8th. This is Africa 54.
Are West African armies being outmatched by tech-savvy jihadis? Niger's president says yes. In South Africa, sounding the alarm on violence against women. And has the sharp divide on vaccines impacted our sense of empathy?
We begin in West Africa, where Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum is calling on West African armies to find new strategies to combat the growing jihadist threat. Bazoum says new and improved technologies have given militants the upper hand as they seek to destabilize the Sahel region. Olivia Chan reports.
Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum is saying that the country's army often finds itself outgunned by militants who benefit from weapons and telecommunications equipment taken in from Libyan smuggling networks. Groups linked to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State have expanded their reach in the central Sahel since 2017, staging regular attacks and have killed thousands of people and displaced millions across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. This was the president at Dakar International Forum on Peace and Security in Senegal.
Nowhere in the world have rebel groups ever had access to the same weapons as the legal forces they are fighting, as is the case today in the Sahel. I even think that for some weapons, the proportion held among the terrorists is higher than those held by the regular forces.
The latest militant attack came over the weekend. Niger's government said on Sunday gunmen have killed at least 12 soldiers in a clash in the southwest of the country, near the border with Burkina Faso.
Olivia Chan of Reuters reporting. Up to 1 million COVID-19 vaccines are estimated to have expired in Nigeria last month without being used, according to two sources that spoke to Reuters. This is one of the biggest single losses of doses. The expired doses were made by AstraZeneca and delivered from Europe, the sources told Reuters. They were supplied via COVAX, the dose-sharing facility led by the Gavi Vaccine Alliance and the WHO, which is increasingly reliant on donations. A third source said some of the doses arrived within 4 to 6 weeks of expiry and could not be used in time, despite efforts by health authorities. Governments on the continent of over 1 billion people have been pushing for more vaccine deliveries. In Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation and home to more than 200 million people, fewer than 4% of adults have been fully vaccinated, according to the World Health Organization. A recent surge in supply has found many African countries without the capacity to manage the shots, some of which come with a short shelf life. Africa needs to make its own vaccines to avoid a repeat of its supply problems in the COVID-19 pandemic, but faces big obstacles in turning itself from a pharmaceutical testing ground into a place where vaccines are created, according to experts. The Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing, PAVM, has set as a target that 60% of the continent's routine vaccine needs, or between 1.4 and 1.7 billion doses yearly, should be met by local manufacturing by 2040, up from about 1% now. Experts meeting at a PAVM conference in Rwanda said the pandemic had shown Africa urgently needs to tackle its dependence on imported vaccines, but they outlined daunting obstacles from brain drain to power shortages. Martin Fried, coordinator of the World Health Organization Initiative for Vaccine Research, said Africa had produced many scientific researchers, but not a workforce capable of designing and making vaccines. He urged the continent's political and scientific leaders to focus on changing that skill set. The PAVM, which is backed by the African Union and brings together experts from across the continent, is working on a wide-ranging strategy to address the various challenges. In the shadows of the coronavirus pandemic, violence against women has been alarmingly on the rise around the globe, with half of South African women reporting at least one incident of violence in their lifetime. A local tech company has developed an alarm system to help stop abuses. Linda Giftash reports from Johannesburg.
A click of a button could save a woman's life. That's what South African firm Afrotech Technologies hopes to achieve with its alert app. Gender-based violence has become so rampant since coronavirus lockdowns, President Cyril Ramaphosa has called it the country's second pandemic. Afrotech presents its app as one solution, allowing users to discreetly alert friends, family, and authorities that they are in danger.
We're not saying that our tech or our solution is the silver bullet, but it certainly is one of the pieces of this big puzzle that can make a difference to ending this situation, hopefully over time. And I think COVID became a catalyst for a lot of people to adopt, a lot more people to adopt technology. And hence why we felt creating a technological solution.
The South African Police Service says more than 10,000 people were raped between April and June this year. That's an increase of 2.8% from before the pandemic. Another 15,000 cases of domestic violence were reported in that same period. Organizations providing support to survivors say those figures don't paint a full picture, as many cases go unreported. The lack of data about the crisis is another solution Afrotech plans to provide with the information it collects from users.
We're also putting AI systems behind our app to be able to then hopefully predict trends of what's going to happen. So empower police stations, empower private security, empower NGOs to then be able to have a proactive rather than a reactive response to this challenge.
People without smartphones can still use the alert system. The company has designed a panic button that looks like a USB stick, as well as a wristwatch that provides the same response. Social workers say these interventions will make a big difference, but more still is needed.
We need to target families. Ask, why is this happening? Is it a tradition? Is it your family history? Is it your background? And if so, how can we change it? And ultimately, we need to pay attention to our children. What are we teaching them?
High rates of gender-based violence long precede the coronavirus pandemic. National efforts to improve laws for people escaping abuse have been ramped up in the past year, along with promises of government funding. But experts say women often do not know how to get help or that help even exists.
The question about who takes responsibility comes back to the age-old problem when it comes to addressing and responses to GBV in South Africa. There isn't coordination across the board between different government departments as well as different stakeholders.
It's not just victims who need information. Advocates say the public as a whole need to be educated on what GBV is and how to respond to it.
How do we break the cycle with my attitude, my view of what gender-based violence is? I'm a neighbor, I see this happening, I close my door and I go inside. So where's the disconnect that we need to understand?
Witnesses of violence can report incidents to police or via a national hotline or nonprofits, and they can do so anonymously. If more people intervened, Stevens believes it could be life-changing for victims and help shift the culture so that gender-based violence is no longer the norm. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Living through a pandemic has been a stressful and difficult challenge. Divisions between the vaccinated and unvaccinated have made the past 2 years even more stressful. Karina Bafrajazian has our report.
Sometime over the past 2 years, getting a COVID vaccine became a huge point of conflict between Americans. There are websites devoted to shaming people who refused the vaccine, only to become seriously ill or die from the disease. And there have been reported threats of violence leveled against vaccine advocates and public health experts like Dr. Anthony Fauci. Digging past politics, the fact remains that COVID hits the unvaccinated the hardest, but that fact doesn't seem to be registering. Piercarlo Valdesolo is an associate professor of psychology at Claremont McKenna College.
What we're seeing with the virus is a highly politicized topic, stoking in-group, out-group sentiments. And one of the dominant ways that people react emotionally to the suffering of out-group members is a muted sense of empathy, and at the extreme, even a sense of pleasure in the pain of out-group members.
Retired Maryland resident Linda Mercer was initially against getting a COVID-19 vaccine. She says her concern rose from the speed with which the vaccine was developed, and relatives and former colleagues shared her skepticism. But that changed in the middle of 2021 when Mercer got the virus. Mercer spent a few weeks in hospital. After she recovered, she and her family got the vaccine.
It made me say, okay, get the vaccine, because if the vaccine could just save you from getting as sick as I did, I'd rather have the vaccine than to catch COVID again.
Experts say Mercer's story shows how vaccine opponents can change the minds of others with similar views.
At least from a psychological perspective, it makes sense that anti-vaxxers would be more compelled by the story of an individual in-group member who is suffering than reading news stories about how many people are dying of COVID every day or how effective a vaccine is.
A study at Brigham Young University suggests that personal stories do more to encourage vaccinations than faceless statistics. In an experiment, students who opposed the vaccine interviewed people who got illnesses that could have been prevented with a vaccine. By the end, roughly 70% of students had changed their mind about vaccinations. Experts say this suggests that education does more to change attitudes about vaccines than does public shaming. For Karina Bafrajan in Washington, Anna Rice, VOA News.
Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, award-winning Zambian entrepreneur uses technology to transform plastic waste into eco-friendly materials. But first, Heidi Adams tells us what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa. Stay with us.
Be sure to join me for the next Straight Talk Africa. We'll talk about the Nobel Prizes. Africa has had many illustrious and some controversial Nobel laureates. There was jubilation when Tanzanian-born novelist Abdulrazak Gurnah won the 2021 Nobel Prize in Literature. But how relevant are these awards to Africans? And are these institutions in step with the times? We'll also discuss whether it's time Africa had a Nobel-style awards of its own. Join me, Heidi Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Pope Francis made a private pre-dawn visit to a Rome religious landmark on Wednesday for the second year in a row because of the COVID-19 pandemic. He decried the stone hearts of those not moved by the suffering of migrants. He prayed and placed a basket of white roses at the base of a 12-meter column bearing a statue of the Madonna. December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, is a national holiday in Italy and some other countries of Catholic tradition. A Vatican statement said the pontiff had prayed for healing the victims of COVID-19, war and climate change, and asked the Madonna to melt the stone hearts of those who put up walls to keep other people's pain away from them. The world migration crisis was a theme at the center of his recent trip to Cyprus and Greece, which ended on Monday. During that trip, he condemned the exploitation of migrants for political purposes, branded the global indifference to their plight the shipwreck of civilization, and lamented that Europe was in the era of walls and barbed wire. Nobel Literature Prize winner Abdul Razak Gurnah has criticized the United Kingdom's government's lack of humanity in its response to refugees. He was taking questions on Tuesday from journalists online ahead of the Nobel Prize ceremony. Gurnah referenced the UK Home Secretary Priti Patel, saying her response to those seeking to come to the UK as refugees is strange given her own family's history.
It's as if they have had no experience of refugees. It's as if this is a new thing that hasn't happened before. When Europe, of course, let alone other ages, but Europe over the last 50 or 60 years or so, or more, maybe 70 years, has had experience of wave after wave of refugees who have turned out to be major contributors to the societies that has received them, important contributors. Just look at the government. You know, the woman who sits there and says, these thieves, these criminals, these whatever. Her own parents were people who arrived in England only a generation ago and have made good. It seems strange to me. It's a lack of, well, humanity.
The Tanzanian novelist won the 2021 Nobel Prize in Literature for his uncompromising and compassionate penetration of the effects of colonialism and the fate of the refugee. Based in Britain and writing in English, Gurnah, 72, joins Nigeria's Wole Soyinka as the only two non-white writers from sub-Saharan Africa ever to win what is widely seen as the world's most prestigious literary award. In a virtual summit on Tuesday, U.S. President Joe Biden laid out to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin the steps that the U.S. would take should Moscow decide to invade Ukraine. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara has this report.
On the day Ukraine's armed forces celebrated the 30th anniversary of their formation in 1991, after the country had broken from Russia, Ukraine's fate was discussed by U.S. President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin, who met virtually on Tuesday.
Hello. Good to see you again.
The meeting, which U.S. news organizations were not permitted to film, followed their in-person summit in Geneva in June. Biden warned Putin to stop mobilizing troops along the Ukrainian border, almost 100,000 according to some estimates.
If Russia further invades Ukraine, the United States and our European allies would respond with strong economic measures. We would provide additional defensive materiel to the Ukrainians above and beyond that which we are already providing. And we would fortify our NATO allies on the eastern flank with additional capabilities in response to such an escalation.
Ukraine has been fighting pro-Russia separatists in its eastern region since 2014, when Moscow seized Crimea. At the summit, Putin demanded guarantees from Biden that the Western military alliance NATO would not include Ukraine, which is seeking membership.
This is a work discussion during a very tough period. The escalation of tension is off the scale in Europe. It's extraordinary.
This is Biden's second virtual summit with an adversary. In his November virtual meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Biden discussed another territorial hotspot, Taiwan.
If Russia is seen as getting away with invading Ukraine and somehow being seen as succeeding here, China will be watching this very closely, and we'll see it as sort of as a dry run for a potential operation against Taiwan.
VOA asked whether the U.S. is prepared to deal with the nightmare scenario of a Russian invasion of Ukraine and a Chinese invasion of Taiwan simultaneously.
The United States is going to take every action that we can take from the point of view of both deterrence and diplomacy to make sure that the Taiwan scenario you just described never happens, and to try to avert the invasion and deter the invasion into Ukraine. That is the object of our policy right now.
The White House said the two leaders had a productive discussion on JCPOA, talks on the Iran nuclear program that are currently on hold. As his administration focuses on pandemic recovery ahead of the 2022 midterm elections, Biden is eager to avoid conflict. Hours before his meeting with Putin, Biden marked the 80th anniversary of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor with a somber visit to the World War II Memorial in Washington. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
In our tech report, going green is a buzzword that is generating headlines across the globe. In Zambia, a young award-winning social entrepreneur is leveraging technology to transform plastic waste into eco-friendly sanitary pads, earrings, and construction materials. Africa 54's technology correspondent Paul Ndiho via Skype spoke to Mwinji Nakamba, founder and CEO, Westmart Zambia, based in the capital, Lusaka.
Mwinji Nakamba, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me here.
You run a social enterprise in Lusaka, Zambia. You've been incredibly lucky in the sense that you are trying to help a lot of people. You've impacted a lot of lives in Zambia from what you do. Let's start there.
I'm the founder of Westmart Zambia, a social business enterprise that utilizes plastic waste and transform it into environmentally friendly assets and construction materials. So we make pebbles, we make hair accessories, we make bangles, we make quite a number of things using plastics in an effort to attain a clean, green and healthy Zambia, and also empower the poor and the marginalized youth in our community. One other project that Westmart is leading is Sahel. It's a community-driven initiative that is aimed at empowering adolescent girls and women in reusable pad making. So this is like a source of income-generating activities for these women and girls that live in the low-income communities.
How did you get involved into this waste management and coming up with these environmentally friendly products?
It all started in 2017 when Zambia was hit with cholera outbreak. Yeah, so year in, year out, we experience this cholera outbreak in our country. We get people dying from cholera. And then what I discovered was it was not the waters anyway, but it was a plastic that we keep throwing in every day. And in Zambia, we have a tendency of saying government yaganepo, meaning the government should look into this matter. Meanwhile, we are the ones that are actually littering littering the environment, messing up the drainages, blocking the drainages and what have you. And then when it's rainy season, the drainages are all filled up with garbage. So I turned to science to change the status quo, and I formed Westmart Zambia. So I started recycling. I did my research. I got a few things on how to make earrings, how to make bangles that I shared on my WhatsApp status. A lot loved them, and then they wanted us to buy them there and then. But then I was like, okay, if we all saw the value in these plastics, we would not litter them anyhow. So if, for instance, I was drinking Coke, and then I know the value it will bring to me. If I recycled it, was going to give me money, I would not throw it anyhow. So yeah, I organized youth from 4 different communities. These are the communities I'm working with in Zambia. So the youth are actively engaged in recycling and they get to sell the products by the most. This is like an income generating activity. Many have been able to take themselves back to school through the same initiative.
What a fascinating story. So you saw an opportunity, it was a niche market and you decided to take chances on it. How has the response been like?
The response has been excellent. We've been getting quite a number of orders from different organizations, different women, from all angles, from all, walks of life. So basically, they're not just for the low income, but even for people like me and any other woman can use them. Other project that Westmart is doing is a community-driven initiative that is aimed at empowering adolescent girls and women in reusable pad making. So what happened is that when we are having these trainings, some girls would not attend this training because of menstrual issues. And the time we were hit by COVID, things had hyped. And then I could tell, from myself, really, I'm struggling to get the pads. What more the person who's in the, in the low community, in the slums. So we started making these reusable pads.
I like the fact that as a young person, you think off your feet. You are incredibly talented. How you're able to make these pads on a mass scale, or you're still making them on a very small scale?
We are making them on a small scale. And that has been the challenge because we get mass orders and we are only able to produce on on a small scale.
If you were to talk to your president about some of the projects that you're working on, what would you ask him? Or what would you want your president to know about what you do?
Wow.
How can the government help you?
Okay, that's a very, very interesting question. Because for me, I've been talking about moving away from the government Yaganepo syndrome. So if I could create a conducive environment for us.
Thank you so much for your time, Mwinji.
Thank you, thank you.
Amazing young girl, Mwinji Nakamba. That was Africa 54 tech correspondent Paul Ndiho speaking to Mwinji Nakamba, founder and CEO of Westmart Zambia. Two computer scientists at the University of Maryland have developed a new artificial intelligence system that evolves to detect and evade internet censorship in repressive countries. VOA's Julie Tabo has more.
Repressive governments around the world monitor and control internet traffic being sent and received by their citizens. Attempts to evade such censorship is a slow and cumbersome process. Often, researchers must manually search for ways to circumvent it.
Now we understand that these different countries will use a heterogeneous mix of different devices.
But computer scientists at the University of Maryland have developed artificial intelligence software called Geneva that learns how censoring technology is being used and adjusts in real time to circumvent it.
I think Geneva changes this cat and mouse game because it finally allows the evaders to react very, very quickly to changes in censorship.
Information on the internet is broken into data packets by the sender's computer and reassembled by the receiving computer. Repressive regimes monitor the data packets and block requests that either contain flagged words or prohibited domain names. Geneva automatically evolves to circumvent this type of censorship in a couple of ways.
One way, it might make the censor think, oh, this isn't something that needs to be censored. This is fine. I'll let it happen. Or it tricks the censor into thinking that it did tear down the connection, that it stopped the communication, when in fact it didn't really.
For example,
about a year ago, China deployed a totally new censorship system to try and interrupt specific types of secure communications. It took our software only about an hour to come up with ways to defeat it.
What's more, users don't have to install Geneva. It can run on the background of a web browser.
This was very important to us because it means that people can evade censorship without having to take on any danger of installing anti-censorship software in the first place.
Julie Tabo, VOA News, College Park, Maryland.
And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.